We are reconvening the board meeting of August 26, 2014. I convened it in 1982. Slight error at 5 o'clock. Okay. We will take some action related to executive session, but that will be later in the agenda. Roll call. Hiroshi?
Hiroshi Eto, Director, District 5.
Claire Wilson, Director.
Carol Gregory, Director, District 4. Go ahead.
Sally McLean, Superintendent.
Jeffrey McAnalloy, Director, District 1.
Danny Peterson, Director.
Okay, flag salute. Carrie, would you like to lead us in the flag salute? Gary?
Oh. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move that the Board of Education approve the meeting agenda of August 26, 2014 as submitted.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion? Any additions, any changes?
No.
Seeing none, all in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, approval of the consent agenda.
Madam President, I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda of August 26, 2014 with the change of, on item 4H, changing it from Rainier View to Lake Grove Elementary.
I second that motion.
Do you have any comments you want to make on that motion?
Thank you.
Anything you want to see? Okay.
Yeah.
Discussion?
Just, I guess with that, I don't know if we're having a discussion about that later, but obviously the item 4H, grateful to the Seahawks and the United Way and the National Football League for what they're going to be doing over there at Lake Grove on the 3rd, and that's just fantastic. We're grateful for the donation that's listed there tonight, and I know the kids and the community, they're really going to enjoy having those things added to their playground there.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, we're going now to public comments for the board meeting, not for the public hearing. Looks like you have a blue sheet in your hand. Is that for the public comment? Okay, you want to give that to Chris, please? She needs that before we could proceed. Is there anyone else that, okay? Thank you. Nancy, would you like to speak?
Right now?
Yes, right now.
Oh, okay, I would.
Thank you.
Well, I was here last week, and I just have so much to say about Federal Way. I've lived here 50 and 60 years, and my kids went to school here, and it's Adelaide, and it's been a real rat race. Our cars now, we have lived on 21st Avenue Southwest before we were a city. I mean, we know it, and the people are still there. But what's happening, the cops are not stopping the speeders. They are going in 6 o'clock in the morning, we're not allowed to sleep. I'm sorry, I worked at Weyerhaeuser for 20 years and Virginia Mason and Children's Clinic, and the buses are coming down from the schools at 6:45. That's wrong. No, they come off of the main road on 16th, and they are coming down by Adelaide. There's no signs at all. The Lakota has 2 signs over there and 1 over here, and there's 12 down in Twin Lakes. People have gotten tickets like mad, but Adelaide has nothing. So I went for 3 times to the guy on the road department, and he, oh yeah, they're gonna put a sign up there. Now they tell me they're gonna put another one up on 16th, and there's a 4-way stop there already. Why can't they, somebody came down, there was 2 cars that came down from Adelaide, over the hill, over 21st, and up to the hillside and tore up 2 yards. And nobody tells you anything. It's like the driver that was killed by Dairy Queen. Do you all know about that? Nobody even knows about it. Now we need the great big fat buses for the school board to not, they come off at 16th, they should turn into Adelaide parking lot and pick up safely with lights or no rain right there in this porch. And that school bus should go out, up 16th and out to Dash Point Road or 16th. They should be safely. I think our kids need safety. And they were coming up from 21st Avenue, and I took out a petition so that people would sign a 4-way stop. And the whatever the court did, they stopped it. We need safety. And I was walking one morning, there was a car right there. He jumps up over his seat and takes off. He could have grabbed a little kid and off with her, and they go to Adelaide. And those cars should not be parked on 16th. They are that apartment is bad. So please help us.
Seeing no further, we're moving on to superintendent comments.
Well, thank you. I actually have quite a few things to talk about tonight, so I will try not to take up the entire agenda evening. It's been a month, I know, since we've had a full board meeting, and I continue to work with making connections in our community. I've had opportunities to meet with a variety of folks, including Becca Martin from the Greater Federal Way Chamber, worked with Anna Hall with the Federal Way Symphony, have met most recently with our Federal Way PTSA Council leadership, and had conversations with Mary Jean Ryan, who was instrumental in launching the Community Center for Education Results, more commonly referred to as the Roadmap Project. I've also had an opportunity to present or have a conversation more appropriately with the Kiwanis and with our Advancing Leadership Youth. Both of those opportunities were lots of fun. And as your new superintendent, typically new superintendents start on July 1st, so while I'm technically through my first 90 days, I've had the opportunity to take advantage of two trainings for new superintendents, which I've learned things at both of those. So just like I learn something new every day now. We had a great board retreat, which I'm sure you'll hear board members talk about. And then I had the great honor to kick off the district's all administrators retreat earlier in August, where we spent some time as a group working around the board's policy governance ends or goals and identifying all the different strategies that are in place currently in the district to support those ends. I think it's important to note that August is not lazy time for the school districts. A lot is happening right after the all administrators retreat. The Teaching for Learning department, along with other of their Teaching for Learning friends, launched an extensive and intensive training for all of our certificated staff this year. Historically, we do train the trainer model, so where one or maybe two people from each of our 38 locations come and get training. We actually provided training to all 1,400 employees in the English language arts arena and in math across the K-12 continuum. I think it's also important to note that we have launched the special education module of the EduPoint Synergy product line, and we're entering or celebrating our first anniversary of the initial launch of the student information system and gradebook. We continue, of course, to work hard to integrate all of our different systems, and am pleased with the great amount of data that we're able to have access to that has not necessarily been visible to us. Dave Davis and his crew have been moving along the data warehouse, and that has been launched for our teachers now too. Our school supply efforts, both in our community and in our schools, are in full swing. We literally have had tons of materials received. Those materials have been sorted and are now boxed up for distribution. I wandered through my old stomping grounds in the business office today, and I'm like going, it smells like color crayons down here. David Wilson tends to spearhead that work for us. I think you will also hear a bit perhaps from a couple of board representatives who had an opportunity to attend a Harvard Family Engagement Institute. I also want to point out the fact that other parts of work that keep us busy over the summer is this is the time that major maintenance projects occur. So while some people may have some downtime in July, this is the time where painting and carpeting occur, where things as significant as electrical transformers and piping are restored and underway. So as a very big slate of projects that Director Cindy Wendland has been able to implement this year with the infusion of funding in MSOC that we've not had for a number of years. And so I think that's been a welcome relief and a nice down payment on moving forward. And you'll hear more about some of that work from Cindy Wendland and Rick Levitt later on this afternoon. I want to take a minute to talk about No Child Left Behind and the impacts of adequate yearly progress, trying to share information in a positive tone. And so to set some background information, while I think it's important for us to remember, because I had forgotten this, that while Congress has not yet reauthorized the Federal Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which is abbreviated ESEA, and remember this current congressional rule expired in 2007. It's more commonly referred to as No Child Left Behind. Federal Way School District, along with every other school district in the state of Washington, is once again subject to the sanctions of No Child Left Behind. We've lost our waiver under No Child Left Behind. Washington State's waiver was revoked because student achievement on the state assessment was not made a required component of the teacher evaluation program that has been adopted in this state. I want to take a moment to point out that student growth is a component of TPEP, but that student growth component is not tied to the Washington State assessment. And interestingly enough, some of you may have noticed that last Thursday, our Education Secretary, Arnie Duncan, the nation's Education Secretary, delayed the requirement to tie student growth to a state assessment. We don't yet know at this point in time if this means Washington State's waiver will be reinstated, but we are proceeding down the road that the waiver will not be reinstated. So for those of you who have forgotten, the original law requires that 100% of our students in 43 subcategories across 9 grade levels, 100% of our students in 43 subcategories across 9 grade levels pass state assessments by 2014. For districts that fail this threshold, again, most likely all 295 school districts in the state of Washington. We may have some very small districts that serve 3, 6, or 9 kids, perhaps, that were able to achieve 100%. The sanctions are applied. And as required with the sanctions, we've redirected 20% of our Title I funds, approximately $1 million, which you'll hear about during the budget public hearing. And a variety of required communication letters have been prepared for parents and staff that will be released or possibly modified after Superintendent Randy Dorn's press release tomorrow. So we're just waiting for that. I do want to share that we have some very positive results. While we're currently looking at what's referred to as unscrubbed data, and I'm only looking at the all category, one of the 43 categories. I would like to just celebrate some of the achievement at our elementary schools. So Brigadoon, in 3rd grade, 97.4% of our students met standard on the state assessment. In math, 96.1% met standards. Also at Brigadoon, in 5th grade math, 90.8% of our students met standard. At Green Gables, 91.9% of the 5th graders met the reading standard. At Lake Dolph, 94.8% made the 3rd grade reading standard. Meredith Hill, in the 5th grade reading cell, 93.4% of the students met or passed the state assessment. Mirror Lake, 3rd grade reading, 91.6%. Panther Lake, 4th grade reading, 90.1%. Rainier View, 3rd grade reading at 92.8%, 5th grade reading at 95.3%, and 5th grade math at 98.9%. At Illahee, remember, has 2 5th grade classrooms. At Illahee, the 5th grade reading had 94.8%. As we move into middle schools and then into high schools, I think it's important to remember that the numbers of students that we're pushing towards that 100% are significantly larger than at elementary. But I want to celebrate our middle school successes. Woodmont and Nautilus, which are both K-8 schools, Nautilus had 6th grade reading scores with 98.1%. Woodmont had 3rd grade reading at 91.7, 6th grade reading at 96.4, 7th grade reading at 100%, and 7th grade math at 92.6%, and 8th grade reading at 100%. We also know our Federal Way Public Academy returned 6th grade reading at 98.1, 6th grade math at 94.8, 7th grade reading and math both at 94.8, unless I transposed a number, 10th grade reading at 100%, 10th grade writing at 100%, and 10th grade math at 100%. At TAF, another small academy school that serves 6th through 12th graders, we saw similar results with 7th grade reading at 91.6, 8th grade reading at 96.3, 10th grade reading at 100%, 10th grade math at 95.2, maybe that was 10th grade writing, and 10th grade math at 100%. The Internet Academy also celebrated 92% of the 10th grade students taking the math assessment meeting standard, and the one of the programs housed at Truman, the Career Academy, also was successful with 10th grade reading. Again, I don't want to diminish the results at middle school and high school because they're working with significantly larger numbers of students. It's much harder at high school to move 400 students to 100% than it is to move 60 students to 100%, and so we've seen reasonable gains at middle schools and high schools, and of course I'm looking forward to our final data and then being able to look at cohort data over time as we move forward. So again, I wanted to share those results because we're not measuring student growth here, we're celebrating that particular success on this particular assessment at this point in time. And in closing, I just want to say the next time I have the opportunity to sit up here, school will be in session. Our first day of school is Wednesday, September 3rd. The day prior to Wednesday, September 3rd, the school district is actually hosting an all-staff back-to-school rally. So for those of you who might be hearing this for the first time, all school district employees will be assembled in one place for a couple of hours. So don't try to get a hold of us on Tuesday, September 2nd before noon, because we will be occupied with some business work in a collective manner. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity, although I have to say I have a little bit of stage fright in thinking about standing up and speaking to 2,500 to 3,000 people. But I'm looking forward to it. And that concludes my comments this evening.
Thank you, Sally. I want to also say that while that is a school-wide event, the public is also invited, and so if you are interested in attending, you can get on our website and see when and where. I also want to comment, Sally said it's been 90 days. It's been 90 very good days. A lot has been accomplished, and we have a lot to thank you for coming in, having worked a full year without a vacation, getting 2 weeks and off and running. It's been really a pleasure to see the progress that we've all made together, and I think the tone is something that we will all benefit from. Somebody said Sally's very methodical, and I said absolutely. She knows everything about everything, and it's almost scary, but that's the opportunity that we have to have somebody who's really on point in this school district for the next year. So we really appreciate that. Board comment.
Okay, thank you. I recently completed my visits to all the directorates, and I was really impressed with the breadth of knowledge and their real strong commitment to making sure that they're looking at every possible area, including themselves, and trying to get better outcomes in terms of the education of the kids in our schools. And I think what the superintendent pointed out here is that even though you may get a letter saying that the schools are failing, the truth is that the educational quality that a lot of the kids are getting is really up there and should be appreciated. And I really feel badly for the teachers that have to see that report come out in that fashion. But when I met with everybody in the superintendent's office, I was really impressed with the quality of leadership that you have here. And so I did want to make that point. I also wanted to comment on the activity we're seeing in the Federal Way Mirror. Bless Mr. Federal Way, who has commented relative to the grading policy. And I think what it points out to is that we need to state unequivocally that the old power curve and any of that grading policy that was in place back in November where there was an uproar is dead and gone. I think we need to make that clear to the public, because it was clear that the paper picked up on some sentiment within the public that believed that they didn't know what the policy was. So if there's any doubt, I hope we can end that by stating that whatever was in place as the interim stopgap measure for 2014 is in place for 2015, and be done with it. Last, and this is again within the Federal Way Mirror, Mr. Gary Robertson had put in a letter, and he indicated that some frustration about not getting feedback. Ms. Nancy has been here twice now to state the same concern. I don't know if she's actually been given a response. So it would be good if, Madam President, you could make it clear at this point that whether it's a protocol that the Office of the Superintendent will respond or provide a response to you, that we will close out on these comments so that they don't believe that there's a vacuum when a comment's made to the board. That's all I have. Thank you.
Just to respond to your last point, we have talked about this, and it's an issue that we have been talking about for a while. It is our intent when the forms are filled out that we note what the issue was of concern, and we will, through the superintendent's office, be responding to those. So we hope this will work. If it doesn't, tell us.
Hi, did you want to say anything about the grading? I think that you wanted to make a little clarity, I think. So before my comments, or do you want to?
So one piece that we've been working on, Deb Stenberg and the 4 individuals who have been moderating the Gradebook Advisory Committee, Marie Verhar, Vince Blauser, Cindy Black, and Ron Mayberry, we have a draft article that reaffirms that the work that has occurred, and that the fact that we're maintaining the same structure through 14-15, and that article will go in the progress report, which is mailed to every residential home, and then we also have a online version of the progress report. And I know Deb has been, in her very kind way, pushing me to get all those articles ready and finished and say, yes, I'm good to go, but we're very close to having that distributed, so certainly be helpful before the start of the school year.
Can I make one point of clarity too, as part of being the advisory committee, or the grading committee, excuse me? Power law still is in place in our primary schools. K through 5, it is still in place and it's not gone. Secondary, so middle school and 9th through 12th is on an average. But I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, that power law is not completely gone. It is still part of the elementary process at this time.
I think it would be important just to add on to that, as we make those changes, however we do that, we make sure that our school websites are up to date, and again, ask them that at the very front page of their website that they very strategically place what's in for the year, and if there's been questions, if we can just prevent any questions by just having that be up there, so and just really make sure parents don't have to look and hunt more than a click to a web page to find that, because even the district web page is not the first place families go. It's oftentimes their own school site, so that would just be a suggestion to help support the communication.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. I guess for my comments, I would say I'm one of the lucky members of the board who was able to be part of the team that went to Harvard Graduate School of Education, where we were part of the first cohort ever, really looking at research-based practices and family engagement. And although families have been around since the beginning of time, research into families and their involvement and the impact it has on student outcomes and student achievement hasn't necessarily been done in any kind of a formal way. And so had an opportunity, along with Director Gregory and other members of the staff and parents from the district, along with 6 other school districts in the roadmap region, to spend some very intense quality time looking at what research says, and how it is that we begin to look at family engagement as an instructional strategy, not an add-on, but it is one of the most important things, along with good instruction, that will move kids' trajectories forward. And I'm really looking forward to how that may enhance and shape the work that we're doing in the district around our family engagement efforts. I also am really looking forward to this year, as we look at our systems development around early learning, and the focus of the roadmap being pre-K, to cradle to college, kind of what kind of enhancement and strength of system and deepening of the work that we can do. So I'm really looking forward to that. Fred was alive and well this summer, and I know a lot of our students were able to keep their reading up, and to keep their math up, and to keep their lunch going by taking part into the Fred activities as the buses went around. And I know that we'll get some preliminary information hopefully soon around numbers of students that were impacted and the amount of time kids spent at the bus. And then the other thing I guess I would say is this is the week of barbecues and orientations and hopping on the bus. And I know I've one tonight, one tomorrow night, and today ran across a school bus full of teachers that were driving their bus route and stopping at every bus stop, welcoming kids and families, and stopping at the apartment complexes. Also, getting off the bus and welcoming families as a way to help transition kids back into school, and to welcome families and have them understand the importance that they play in this child's life and in the partnership between the school and home. And kids were waiting for the bus between 1 and 1:40, and I just thought it was an incredibly wonderful community event and something that I hope we can continue. So I look forward to a great year. Thanks.
I also had the opportunity of traveling to Harvard for the very intense study session that we had. It was, I think, very profound for me, having a teaching background, to see how we ought to look at the whole question of family engagement and what that means to instructional success. And we're going to have a report from the group that attended in the next few weeks, so I'm not going to go any further, but it was really an amazing opportunity to get a wealth of information in a very short time from amazing experts, and I think we will find that we will greatly benefit from it. I also am on the tour like all the rest of the board members, and I had the opportunity to go Wildwood on Sunday to a picnic where 300 people attended, and after the picnic we went into the classrooms and met the teachers and saw all the work that has already been done in all of the classrooms, and school isn't even started. It was very interesting because I spent some time talking to them about their school, how they felt about it, and over what I heard was, our kids love our school, we believe our kids are being successful, we're very angry at the constant negativism that's thrown at this school. And I thought, well, we as a school district have a big responsibility to educate all children. And in some of our schools, that's going to be easier than in other schools. Wildwood is a school with amazing diversity and amazing opportunity. And what do we as a school board need to do to make sure that the resources that they need to be successful in the eyes of the federal government are there? However, I then continued to think about that. And as I thought about the whole question of No Child Left Behind and the agreement I made with the board 2 weeks ago to look into the activities that were going on to try to lobby against the waiver reduction, Claire wasn't here and she does our legislative work, so I've done a little probing. And while there are a lot of activities going on, and we are waiting to see what the superintendent's going to say tomorrow, I began to take a different tact, and it's one that I hope we as a board will think, and as a staff will think strongly about, and that is, we need to be as honest as we can with our public about how our schools are doing, and let somebody else tell the story. And Sally began that a little bit tonight. We're not saying everything's perfect, but we need a way to measure our schools locally so that we can have an honest conversation with our parents that tells our parents how our children are doing year after year, not an apples and oranges test that comes from someplace else that puts labels on our schools. And if we aren't doing well, we need to tell our public, and we need to tell our public what we need and what's going to make it better, and that's our responsibility. So while we'll still watch the work going on around No Child Left Behind, I hope we will focus much more directly on a conversation with our community about how our schools are doing, with data that we collect on the testing that we're doing that shows how children are improving, not comparing 1/4 grade class from one year with 1/4 grade class from another year and saying that's how kids are doing. We don't know that. Every child's different, but that's how it's being imposed, and that's why we're getting all these simplistic failure, success mantras that really are meaningless. So that's going to be my goal as we go through this next year, is to work with to have all of us work on how do we tell the real story about what's going on in Federal Way in a way that everyone can understand and isn't in any way biased by us or anyone else. And so while I think we need to continue to look at the No Child Left Behind strategies, I hope we don't focus too much there because it's so negative. So anyway, that's what I've been thinking about. I also had the opportunity of working with Advancing Leadership with Sally and working with some of the students. And I got a letter from a student saying to me, you asked me what I would do if I were you in changing our schools. What would be the one thing you would do? And she said, I would want our schools, I would want to go to school to learn because it's fun. Not because of its pressure, not because I'm being pressured, but that I'm excited about learning every day. And I thought, what a powerful statement. Because that's really where we all want our work to get to for our kids. And then finally, we had a board retreat, as Sally mentioned, and I think it was a very successful beginning. We are a board of 5. The longest tenure on this board is 3 years. 2 or 3, 2 or 2, and 1 is new, newer. And so we haven't had much time to work together. As you all know, last year was kind of tumultuous, and we went through that. But we had an opportunity to begin the work of coming together and working in our roles to strengthen the school system in Federal Way. And we are going to be taking on some major projects this year, one of which is determining who our superintendent's going to be. We are going to be doing that with a lot of community input, and that's very important to all of us. We're going to be looking at our governance policies and making recommendations for change where we need it. And that's going to be a huge project. We have before us a committee that Claire Wilson is chairing, the Global Learning Initiative. We need to take a look at that initiative that we started 2 years ago, or actually before then, and see what that really means to us, how we want to move forward, make sure our public is with us, and then give opportunities to our children that they're going to need to have in order to live in a world that's very small. And I just happened to walk in yesterday to the group that has just come back from Ecuador. And I happened over there because it was so noisy. I thought, what is going on? And it was really powerful to see what they had learned and how excited they are about the learning and the experience they just had. And they'll be coming here to explain that to us, and that's going to be very exciting. But we as a district had really opposing views and confusion on this issue, and we want to clarify that. And I'm sure under Claire's leadership that will be very well done, and we as a district then can move forward with how our kids learn in a ever smaller world. And with that, I also want to tell the board that I've given all of you a sheet of paper that I have written out. Our policies require that the board adopt or approve committees if we need them, board committees to do board work. And I am proposing 3 committees as a result of our retreat. Did you get one of those, Hiroshi? Here's one. Do you have one, Claire? Yes. Okay. And I'm not suggesting that we vote on this tonight, but I'm suggesting that you read through it and see if this is your sense of what we did and why we did it. The 3 committees for the public's information are the Superintendent Search Committee, the Board Superintendent Evaluation Committee. We don't have a strong system in this district for evaluating superintendents, and I think that's a responsibility of the board and something we need to put in place. We will be working with the superintendent on that. And we will have a policy governance review committee. In addition to that, the Global Learning Initiative has already been approved, and Jeffrey McAnalloy sits on the grading committee for the board. So we will have this as an agenda item on our next, at our next meeting, so we can decide if this is how we want to go or if there are changes. Done. I got long-winded, sorry.
So Sally, I want to first thank you for recognizing the schools and the scores that we see. And this goes back to actually ends 2 when I said, why are we comparing 4th grade to 4th grade instead of looking at cohort data? And I think it's a conversation as a board that we need to continue to have, that we truly see our growth year over year, to find the pockets of success and the pockets of areas that we may need to focus on. And I think it's something we seriously need to look at and understand, that we truly are looking where our pieces are. It doesn't do any good to compare apples to oranges, as some other board members have said. And I think that's definitely something in this next year that we'll all look at. Being part of the Grading Advisory Committee, I want to make sure that people are aware that through August 29th, if you're interested in serving in that committee, there are some openings. The deadline to submit for that is August 29th. It's on the website. There were emails sent out as well. If you need further clarification, you're more than welcome to contact me or the district office about that if you have questions. Nancy, I just want to kind of comment. I don't know if you've walked on 16th, but I have taken up walking and trying to do 10,000 steps a day, and I can tell you on 16th that work is currently being done to put in signs that are 20-mile-an-hour signs, both to the north and to the south. Those signs are being put in right now. There are signs for that. Okay, I understand, but the school sits on 304th and 16th, so I don't want to say that we're not listening to it, but there is work being done. I also know part of the Lakota project was to make sure that there are sidewalks available from Lakota all the way down 21st. I walk that thing almost daily now for the last 2 months, and it was important for that to happen. It was part of that piece. I know that the 2 largest buses that go into Adelaide, because it's part of my district, actually do come down 304th onto 16th and pull out there and go 16th out to Dash Point. I'm not aware of any buses that are coming on 21st. They may be some of the smaller buses that are serving that. The 2 biggest buses actually come down, so it's okay. I mean, I'll be glad to talk to you about it, but as far as I'm aware in that district, and I'll talk to the principal and look at the district and transportation and talk to Cindy Windland about it. I know that the path, because one of those buses goes right past my house on 12th, that comes out 12th and then goes down 304th to 16th. So the 2 largest buses go that way, and then I'll go out to Dash Point. So, but I hear your concern. I just want to acknowledge your concern, but I would encourage you to see that there is some work being done. So the things you've been asked for.
We live on 21st, and they come at 6:45, so we
Okay.
can't leave.
We need to not have a debate.
Got it, understand. So I was also actually invited to the kindergarten camp at Adelaide, and I went a couple weeks ago. It's for the kindergartners. It's kind of the 4-day piece to bring them in and to begin to help them understand before the school is full. It was really neat to see that, and I also want to thank Grace Church for their opportunity to help serve and give back to the church, to the school by providing lunch on the Thursday. That was a great piece and part of the community involvement. Camelot Garden, 2 master gardeners and myself as a master gardener actually spent 3 hours in that garden last Friday. They'd actually did a project out of that community garden for the last week and had roughly 30 students that go to Camelot and attend that. I got kind of changed hats. We helped them dig weeds and did things for about an hour and a half, and then we did 45 minutes of teaching kits that we have out of the master gardeners speech, and got teaching kits that got to teach them about pollinators, and we got to have interactions and talking with them, and it was a lot of fun to see that involvement and that support out of that. And the retreat, it was 7 hours, and it seems really long, but I want to say how much I appreciate all of my board members, all of them coming together for us to talk and have open and honest dialogue, to talk about partnership with the district and how we get to be and move forward. And I'm really excited about the things that we're looking at and the partnership we're going to have going forward for this year. And that's all. Thank you.
I'll try to keep my comments short and sweet. As a longer-term board member on this board, this is the busiest summer we've had, And it has been just, with our retreat and our work studies and board meetings and all that. And I just commend the board for the hard work. And Sally, thank you for the excellent job you're doing. We appreciate you just hitting the ground running. And, this summer was not slowed down. It was pedal to the metal, and it's commendable. And, these last few weeks we've had the teachers now back, and, it's all staff meetings and that. And everybody, you see that passion, why they do what they do, and they do it really well. And so I'm excited for this next, as we do another rodeo here for this next school year, and appreciate the contracts and all that stuff that was approved, that we were able to approve this last meeting. It's been a busy summer. I want to thank our community members for coming out tonight. I know sometimes too, I think we do as a board and as a district do respond well to our community and give them responses. This is sometimes the community doesn't necessarily, that person might not like the response, and that's okay. That's what I think is great about these meetings, is you can continue to come and present your requests and your opinions, and that's part of the public dialogue that gets to happen. And I also want to thank community members like Red Canoe right now, who's doing the back to school supply drive, South King Fire and Rescue, Grace Church, others that are collecting supplies right now to help our families throughout the district. And it's just fantastic and amazing, the community members that are giving, and they come and continue to donate amazing amounts of supplies to help our kids go back to school prepared with a full backpack ready to go and to learn. So thank you again to all those that are participating in our community, and looking forward to the school year.
Thank you very much. I think we're all looking forward to it. The mic would just stay on. We're now moving to the decisions that we need to make as a result of our executive session. So before you are the motions for from the executive session, not that they were made in the executive session, but they are the proposals to us about the information that we got at the executive session. So now we have to make a decision around these motions. So is someone ready to put the motion on the floor?
Sure. Madam President, I move to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the Federal Way Education Association coaches and the Federal Way Public Schools effective September 2014, September 1 through August 31st, 2017.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion.
We mentioned at the work study. I just want to thank again the work of Chuck Christensen and his team, and the many years of just doing an excellent job of leading that process. And this is yet another one of those contracts that was just smooth and putting together, and just appreciate his work and his attention to detail.
Claire? Okay. Further discussion? Just as was noted, we have done virtually all of our contracts in 1 year, and that's very unusual. And to have them all done is really exciting. Okay, if no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Motion number 2.
Madam President, I move to approve a salary increase of 2.75% for all non-represented exempt staff for the 2014-15 contract year.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. For those of you who may not understand all this language, non-exempt means those that are not in a bargaining unit. And often those are people in administrative positions or others that are not represented by the unions that we work with. And so those are the people who often are the last ones to get their increases, but we must not forget that they are very important to this district. So that's what we have before us tonight. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. We will now recess for our second official public hearing on the 2014-2015 budget. Sally, you want to introduce
I am
that?
pleased to introduce Executive Director Jerry Carlson, who has been the right hand to all of the budget preparation work that you have seen me present over the years. Mike, sorry.
Oh,
Mike.
it wasn't mine.
Sorry. I am pleased to introduce Executive Director of Business Services, Jerry Carlson, who has been instrumental over the years in preparing all of the budget documents that I've had the opportunity to present to the school district. I have the 100% confidence in her knowledge and expertise, and am looking forward to, again, our second public hearing and budget adoption this evening. There are 5 funds that the board's asked to adopt a budget around, and with that, I will let Jerry move forward.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent McLean. I do appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and present some information for the 2014-15 budget. Oops. So some of the topics that I'm going to be covering tonight, and as President Gregory already mentioned, this is the second public hearing that we're having. I will be talking about an overview of all of the funds. We'll be reviewing the general fund specifically. We'll be discussing fund balance. I'll talk a little bit about the expected board actions upon the budget adoption, and we'll accept public comment and then move on to the actual budget adoption. Superintendent McLean also mentioned this. The district has 5 funds that we'll be adopting budget for. The general fund, and what I've got listed here, you can just see are the appropriation levels for each of the funds, as outlined on the resolution that you'll have before you tonight as well. The general fund appropriation, which basically sets the maximum expenditure level that we can spend, is $244,800,000. For the Associated Student Body Fund, $3.9 million. The Debt Service Fund appropriation level, $18.9 million. Our Capital Projects Fund, $40.6, and Transportation Vehicle Fund, a little over $1 million. So the Associated Student Body Fund basically supports the extracurricular activities of the students. I like to think about this fund as there's an acronym, I call it CARS, Cultural, Athletic, Recreation, and Social Activities in Nature. You can see in the ASB fund we're projecting a beginning fund balance of $785,000. Add to that revenues, total revenues of $3,861,000, expenditures of $3.9 million with an ending fund balance of $724,000. The ASB fund, it's governed by the students and a constitution, and the revenues typically come from the fees and fundraisers from the students. The debt service fund is used to make the principal and interest payments on the district's outstanding long-term debt that has been approved by the voters. Taxes are collected and deposited in this fund and used to make those principal and interest payments. You'll note under this expenditure levels, I've got bond transfer fees. There's $500,000. I just want to point out that is really capacity only. We are not anticipating having $500,000 of bond transfer fees. That's just a mechanism for us to build in some expenditure capacity. Because again, we're legally obligated to stay within that appropriation level. So it provides us some capacity there. Within the debt service fund, this just shows an outstanding schedule of our outstanding bonds. All total, we have about $180 million still of outstanding principal, which for the most part is made up of the 2007 bond authorization that the voters approved for $149 million. It's important to note that of that bond authorization in 2007, we still have about $10 million of unsold bonds, which we are planning to sell this year in support of Federal Way High School project. The Capital Projects Fund is used basically for the acquisition of land, buildings, major construction and improvements of buildings, as well as our technology systems. You can see in the revenues for the capital projects fund, the local taxes, 14.4 million. In essence, that's made up of two parts. It's made up of the capital projects levy that was recently passed for Federal Way High School of $10 million, and then our technology levy, also approved by our voters, of 4.4 million, or it's a 6-year levy, and for next year we've got 4.4 million slated for that. The technology levy, that 4.4 million, we're actually, for 2015, that'll be year 5 of that technology levy, so we'll have one more year left on that particular piece. You can also see we've got the $10 million slated for the selling that I just mentioned of the 2007 bond authorization as well. Expenditures in the capital projects fund are about 40.6 million, and I'll talk about some of the detail of that. And you can see that we're slated to have an ending fund balance of about $231,000. So we're winding down in our capital projects. In terms of our cash flow, that's, I think I mentioned at the first public hearing, something that we'll be monitoring very closely. Federal Way High is ramping up. This just shows the list of the projects that we've got budgeted for this coming school year, and you can again see Federal Way High is about $25.2 million that we've got slated for that for this year, along with the various list of other projects. Again, note that I've got spending capacity down there of $8 million. Just another way of us putting in that capacity so that we don't have to come back and go through a whole new budget process for a budget extension if we should have to exceed that maximum appropriation level. The Transportation Vehicle Fund is another fund. This fund is used for the purchase of buses and major repair of buses. It's basically supported with state depreciation dollars that we receive. We don't receive these dollars until August of each fiscal year, which is the last month of our fiscal year. Hence, that's why we still show an ending fund balance of $655,000, because we, again, can't spend that money until we receive that money. Next year, we're slated to buy 8 passenger buses to the tune of about $800,000. Our current fleet is about 10 years old on average, and we have about 142 buses on the road. So the general fund budget. The general fund budget is the district's financial plan. It provides for the daily operations of the district. It's based on a set of assumptions about the future, and it's designed to support the school board's ends within the executive limitations. Some of those planning assumptions that we used for next year, and Superintendent McLean talked about the No Child Left Behind and the sanctions due to the loss of the waiver. We've got $1 million set aside in our Title I funding for that. Another assumption in our planning is that we will have continued funding for our Race to the Top grants. We've also budgeted less than 100% funding for our K-1 high poverty class size reduction. Effective for 14-15, the state has basically tied that funding to an actual compliance. They will go through a calculation to determine whether or not we are at a specific 20.3 class size ratio in our K-1. If we don't show that we are, if we don't meet that ratio, we don't receive that full funding. We don't believe we will be right at the 20.3. We're budgeting conservatively there. Also, conservative enrollment growth, that's past practice, and that our fund balance policy is maintained. Some of the budget priorities for 2014-15 include the new and continuing state and federal mandates, such as TPEP, the Common Core state standards, smaller class sizes in our high poverty schools, again, the No Child Left Behind sanctions, and federal sequestration. on-time graduation support strategies, parent and community engagement expansions. We've got strategic investments in our MSOC, which is known as our materials, supplies, and operating costs, student extracurricular activities, sustainable market and competitive compensation, and again, providing relief to taxpayers and parents. The general fund summary, as I mentioned, general fund budget. Budgeted expenditures are $244.8 million. Budgeted revenues, $240 million. You can see both of those are up, as well as it's supported by our certificated staff. FTE is also up by 4.5%, as well as our classified staff up by 4%. The general fund budget supports about 22,000 students. So as far as enrollment, on a budget-to-budget basis, you can see that we're planning a change in enrollment of 318 kids, roughly 1.5%. Included in that K-12 FTE enrollment, our special ed enrollment is up slightly, 1.75%, and our English language learners continues to grow astronomically every year. It's up 13.33% for next year. Probably important to note too, this is a budget-to-budget change. So the enrollment really, throughout the course of this past year, we've seen a growth in that enrollment, which is included as part of this. This is just a graphical chart that shows the changes in our October 1 head count. Anything above the 0 basically shows that we are growing from October to October. You can see in some of the most recent years, from October to October, we've actually had declines in our enrollment. So it's nice to see that we're on the uptick again. General fund revenue, again, this is a budget-to-budget comparison, and it's broken down sort of by our major funding categories. Overall, our revenues are up $18.2 million, or roughly 8.1%. And if you look at the state basic and the state special purpose, that obviously is the majority of the 18.2. Most of that really is made up of the McCleary, the state taking steps to move towards fully funding education because of the McCleary lawsuit. Some of our state basic enrollment change is, some of the state basic, the 10.1 million, also is our enrollment growth. Local taxes, you can see really what's not changing. We're holding very steady on our local taxes. That again is just our commitment to keeping that the taxes that we're collecting from our local taxpayers at a constant level. Additionally, we're trying to provide relief to the community and students. The local non-tax, you can see that's going down by almost $900,000. That basically is the elimination of our athletic participation fees and the elimination of our all-day kindergarten fees as well.
I have just a quick fee question. By reducing or eliminating fees, how have we impacted the associated student body funds? Are any of those part of that?
No.
Okay.
Those fees are not. I would like to say, however, that it provides more opportunity for those kids perhaps to be shifting some of what they were paying for the fees for basic education to be able to help support more of that ASB and extracurricular activities. Thank you. This is another chart, just revenues by funding source. I thought it was important here just to again point out, as you can see going towards 14-15 in the local taxes, You can see that trend is dropping in terms of, for 14-15, local taxes represent 19% of our budget. The local non-tax, again, which some of that is made up of our fees that we were charging our parents and families, again, that percent of budget is going down. And you can see that both in the state basic and the state categorical, the percent of our total revenues is going up, again, based on the investment that the state is doing with the McCleary lawsuit. General fund expenditures. This is a budget to budget again comparison by object. It's again going up $20.4 million, and the most of that again is within the realm of our certificated salaries, classified salaries, and our benefits. That represents about 85% of our budget, so one would expect that that's where you're going to be seeing the changes at. This is just a graphical of that 85% that is made up of what sometimes we refer to as people, salaries, compensation, and benefits. And then the 15% again is the MSOC, or the materials and supplies and operating costs. So our 85% slice of the pie, certificated staff, again, you can see that that went up by 66 FTE. Our classified staff went up by 30 FTE. Most of the certificated staff that really is investments in our classrooms and our teachers. Some of that is due to our growth, and again, a lot of it is due to the state taking steps towards funding education with the more all-day kindergarten being funded, as well as the enhancements in the high poverty schools for lower class sizes. As far as the classified staff, the 30, some of that is represented by the expansion of our family liaisons, going from 8 schools to 16 schools, and also some targeted supports at our high schools for credit retrieval. I think it's also important to note, in addition to hiring more staff, again, as Superintendent McLean talked about, we've been able to resume a market midpoint implementation. We've provided increases, and overall, if you take into account increases for the experience and education, overall, our district-wide average salaries went up by about 3%. And certainly to note that this is the 6th consecutive year where the state has provided no funding for salary increases. So we've done a commendable job, I believe. The 15%, again, the materials, operating costs, and supplies. The increase in state funding certainly allowed for some strategic investments. We've put $500,000 in curriculum and instructional materials, some investments in student technology, the building maintenance, an expansion of our school outreach coordinators, as well as music instruments. This is just a different picture of our general fund expenditures by activity grouping. Teaching support, support services, and building and central administration. I just wanted to kind of show again those investments in the classroom for student achievement. You can see a bigger percent of our budget still going towards teaching and teaching support. Focusing the resources on student achievement and outcomes. Okay, one of the components of EL7 is in budget planning, speaks to maintaining an unreserved fund balance of not less than 3% of our expenditures. And you can see that while our 2014-15 budget actually draws down our fund balance by $4.2 million, We're still projecting to have a ending fund balance in 2014-15 of 4.16% of our expenditures. So it's above the 3% that is outlined in the EL7. That's indicative of an affordable and sustainable budget. I think it's important to note too that 1%, so in essence we have 3% is what the EL7 speaks to. We're estimating to have 4.16. 1% roughly equates to $2.4 million. And I think it's important to remember that it's good to have that capacity for unforeseen circumstances, changes in enrollment, those sorts of things, so that we're able to react to those things. This is a graph that shows the committed, unassigned, the committed and unassigned fund balance as a percent of our expenditures. The yellow I think of as sort of the cautionary yellow light, and the blue represents actual. So typically, as our practice for budgeting, our fund balance is always conservative, and you can see the actual usually comes in higher as a result of those conservative nature in how we budget. So the budget adoption process, by law, we have to adopt a budget by August 31st. Again, we had our first public hearing on June 10th. The expected board outcomes for tonight: you'll have a motion to adopt the ASB constitutional changes, a motion to adopt the ASB fundraisers, as well as the motion to adopt the 2014 appropriation levels. I talked about this. These are the appropriation levels for each of the 5 funds. And the resolution also sets the preliminary levy certifications for calendar year 2015. So in the general fund, which is the EP&O levy, currently in the budget it's slated for $46,100,000. You'll recall that the voters approved the EP&O levy at $53 million. Our estimated legal authority is $49.5 roughly, and we're planning our budget based on a collection of $44.2 million. Again, recognizing that we're not going out and increasing that tax burden for our community and families. The debt service fund levy certification for calendar year 2015 will be $17 million. Last year it was 15.9, so that is an increase. Again, that's just based on being able to make those principal and interest payments that are scheduled on our outstanding long-term debt. And in the capital projects fund, the levy certifications is a total of $14.4 million, which represents the $10 million that was approved for Federal Way High School and the $4.4 million for the technology levy. Note that the levies can be adjusted through formal board action, and we will expect a rollback in November of that general fund EP&O levy down to that $44.2 million. Okay, that concludes my presentation. I again want to just say I'm excited about moving forward next year with the budget. I think the budget honors our commitment to the taxpayers and the parents of this community. It moves us to market midpoint, again with no state funding dollars for helping us out there, and it makes targeted investments with our new state funding. So I'm proud to present the budget to you, and I'd like to thank and give a lot of appreciation to Gloria Shank, Anita Rhodes, Barb Pagay, Carol Radford, and last but not least, Sally McLean for helping put all of this together.
Thank you. Questions?
I just had a question, Jerry, and that is, I understand that this is a K-12 budget, but I also know, and there's FTE amounts in enrollment around basic ed funding, but we also have early learning programs that we get dollars from the state and feds. So how is that reflected, or how do I as a board member understand how that fits in? Not that we're necessarily voting on that, but as I look at a budget for the next year, is it somewhere and I don't see it, or how does one know it exists?
It is, and this is our full state required budget document. And in there are places that talk about the revenues by funding source. I don't know if you have the full detail or not on the packet that you have, but in essence, we've got revenues that are identified as state revenues, federal revenues, and probably Head Start would stick out in this document. But some of the other ones, such as the early childhood program that we receive from the ESD, the state funding, it's not specifically called out anywhere in this budget. It certainly is embedded in those state and federal revenues, but you won't see it necessarily.
I just look at FTE and I understand funding doesn't come from basic ed, but if I were to look at this and not know any different, I wouldn't necessarily know in our district that we serve anybody below kindergarten, and I may know it's special ed, but it's basic ed funded, and so I just always am in the interest. I understand that this is the budget and it's around looking at where the dollars come from attached to student enrollment, but it's also a document that communicates our dollars and our programming, and so I'm always wondering that, because it doesn't ever show up in the same place, so.
Right.
So it is in there as a line item, but it doesn't show up as an FTE count or anything like that.
Correct.
Okay.
Head Start is called out. We've got expenditures slated at $860,000 for Head Start, and again, ECAP doesn't necessarily show in there the Early Childhood Education Assistance Program, the funding we get from the state.
Right.
That one's not specifically called out. I want to say that is also close to about $800,000 of funding, and certainly has staff to support both of those programs.
And children.
Yes.
Numbers of children that are by a funded enrollment level based on the amount of funds we get. So it's different because it's not an entitlement, which is, so there's only a certain percent or a certain number of kids that can be served. But anyway, thanks.
Further discussion? Questions? Public comments?
I'd just like to say great presentation.
Oh,
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your new position.
Thank you.
We're now moving to public comments. Gary Robertson.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, and Superintendent McLean. My name is Gary Robertson, and I'm an advocate for teachers, librarians, paraeducators, and equality education for all our students. When budget cutting was necessary, the board imposed very modest athletic fees that didn't begin to cover the cost of the programs, which are used by a very limited number of students. The board also required the ASB to pay towards the transportation costs of these activities. The board also eliminated some librarian positions and paraeducators in 80 classrooms. Some thought we had an achievement gap and that any funds that would be available would be used to enhance our efforts to lower the achievement gaps of our students and to provide more opportunities for our graduates to either pursue a college education or find a living wage job. The board is now sending a very powerful and disturbing message regarding the true function of our schools. It is more important to subsidize athletics by elimination of fees, paying for the transportation costs, and adding more sports than it is to restore librarians and paraeducators. Now, I'm not begrudging students who want to become well-rounded and participate in sports programs. But I ask you the $64,000 question. What contribution do they make towards ensuring that we provide a quality education to all our students, which will ensure that they are able to get a well-paying job when they have completed their education? When it comes to the school budget, the students and their education must always come first, and all does mean all. That should be your top priority, and this is the message you need to send. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Further comments? Okay, let's move on to the motion. Well, we're going back into regular session. And we are moving to the adoption of the 2014-2015 budget. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move that the budget be approved.
Okay, there's a, would you assist?
Would,
We have legal language we have to use.
well, is there a second for that? There's no, is there a second? No second, then?
Yeah, but I just want him to go ahead and make the correct motion.
Okay.
Oh, right here. I move to accept the slate of elementary, no,
There's actually
three
three
separate
motions.
and you just want only the budget, I think.
Go
at
ahead
this
with the
point.
first one, yeah.
Okay, I move to accept the slate of elementary and secondary associated student body fundraisers as submitted. I move to adopt resolution 2014 to 20.
One at a time, okay?
Okay,
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded to accept the slate of elementary and secondary associated student body fundraisers as submitted. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Hiroshi?
I move to adopt resolution 2014-15, fixing and setting
What?
appropriations.
You forgot one. Go ahead, the second one.
I actually have issues with the second one, so
That's
I'll
okay, but-
abstain from that one.
Madam
Okay,
President, I
but-
move to adopt the ASB constitutional changes submitted for Illahee Middle School and Todd Beamer High School.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Do you want to speak to your motion, Danny?
I don't have, I have no problem with this motion.
Okay, Hiroshi?
What I'm reading is that, and this is for the Constitution, is that not
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
So what I'm reading is that basically you can have a C- and participate in sports, but you can't run for student body president. And that seems a little odd to me. And so I thought maybe this is the long screwdriver trying to tweak this, but I thought it should be kind of be put up to awareness that the student bodies, you know, they're able to craft these things, but it is kind of a civics lesson to say to ourselves, you know, when is there such an education requirement to run for public office? And ASB is somewhat of a public office. So from that perspective, I thought it was a little bit odd, and I just wanted to point it out.
Okay. You want to respond to that? Is that what?
No, I appreciate that comment and observation, and actually one of your other board members, President Gregory, had the same concern, and so Executive Director Blauser and I have been engaged in some conversations, and Vince will be leading conversations with the secondary principals, because we, it's a practice that's been in place for a number of years, and we think that it's time to revisit that practice and requirement. So we appreciate those observations from both of you and look forward to probably different proposals next year.
I concur with your concern, and I look at it from the perspective of part of what we're teaching through the Associated Student Body is citizenship requirements, and it's a responsibility in this country to participate in your government, not a threshold requirement. And so this, to me, causes our kids to think that only certain people can participate, and that's the worst thing we could teach. So I totally concur with you. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to adopt the ASB constitutional changes submitted by Elahi Middle School and Todd Beamer High School, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Now the big one. Toshi, or Hiroshi, you wanted that one?
I move to adopt Resolution 2014-15, fixing and setting appropriations for the 2014-15 fiscal year for all funds and setting the preliminary tax levies for calendar 2015.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to say I appreciate the comments, and although I know we always don't agree on what the outcomes are, it's important that that's put forth. And I think one of the pieces of conversation, especially around paraprofessionals in full day K classrooms, and that clearly children need to have support and teachers need to have support. And I strongly say, even though we may not have replaced exactly what was taken away with the initial removal of those positions, children who need services and supports get that on a personalized and individualized way, and that although there's not a para assigned to a classroom or to a teacher, there's clearly support for students in full day K classrooms, as in any of our classrooms, who need that support. And we also do have lower class sizes, so I am in support of the proposal as it was put forth, but just wanted to make sure, specifically, Gary, that we have this conversation publicly, because I know it's very important, and it is about students, and it's about outcomes for students, and it's about supporting teachers as well. So thank you.
Further discussion?
I just want to thank everybody that has been a part of this for Jerry's presentation tonight. Sally was definitely a part of this. Every year she's had, her fingerprints around this. And, this is one of those things that takes months. It's months in the making, and it's a huge undertaking. And as we're setting goals and looking at different priorities, and there's so many, it's very complex. And just tonight, the explanation of it, and, throughout the year, just being able to get the presentation tonight and have this all culminate is, in a simple vote, we're passing it, but it's been hours and hours and hours of hard work. And I just thank all that have been involved.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you very much to everyone who worked on this. Okay, let's move on to elementary playground equipment update. You wanna say something before? Okay.
Good
Cindy?
evening. I'm Cindy Winland. I'm your support service director. And with me tonight, where are you? Is Rick Levitt. Rick is our maintenance manager. Not only does Rick basically look at all the maintenance and handle all the maintenance in half our schools, but he also is our playground certification lead person. So Rick has been instrumental in putting these playgrounds together. So first I'd like to say, the district passed a 6-year levy in 2012 to rebuild Federway High School and improve security at schools, and then renovate 19 playgrounds. Sorry. Oh. Is it not gonna go? There we go. So last year in 2012-13, the playgrounds we replaced were Lake Dolphin, Mark Twain, and Silver Lake. This year, we've done Camelot and Olympic View, and I'll let Rick talk to you a little bit more about them.
So just yesterday, we had the inspection from the Public Health Department. They came and they certified us, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, so where we go on these structures. When we design these structures, I like to sit down with the principal and the PE teacher, some of the PTA representatives, and put a team together and come up with a good toy that the kids can really use. Today's structures are so much different than when we were kids. We had a pole in the ground with some asphalt around it, but today's structures are meant to really challenge the kids, and they don't realize they're being challenged. They're out there playing, but yet they're being challenged physically, and they're really neat. This one, Camelot, of course, is the home of the knight, so we want to try to incorporate some medieval stuff with it. We have a dragon that the kids can climb up to the back of the dragon with some flags and some little castle accents to it. and we was able to put a Sky Rider in there. So this is the Camelot toy. And we also have ADA ramps with ADA transfer stations, so the kids can come up to it in the wheelchairs and be able to get up on some of the lower ramps and be able to play on different things so they can get out there and enjoy the structures. So that one's Camelot. The other one's Olympic View. Olympic View, this is a really beautiful structure. The ASB gave us some money to help us out with this one. So with that, we was able to put a big climbing wall on there and then a little jungle gym with this one. So this is a really neat structure. There's a lot going on with this one here. Has like a nature sound bar up top where you can spin a wheel, and it generates itself as like a self-generator, and it makes all kinds of animal noises. There's little animal things hidden on there, and the kids go on like a nature hunt. So this is, I love this thing. I played on a little bit yesterday and kind of really neat. So that's the structures there.
So next year, and I'll let Rick talk a little bit about it because there's a difference in next year that it's going to be an upgrade versus a renovation and or total redo. And Adelaide, Brigadoon, Enterprise, and Lake Grove, Mirror Lake will be the schools that will be getting this upgrade. So if you want to tell them about upgrades.
So yeah, the upgrades, today's toys, they're, the older ones, they're just really sun faded, the plastic starts to crack on them, but the structures are still good. The slides are metal slides, and everybody knows metal gets really hot, so we're going to upgrade some of the slides and put some plastic ones in there and change some panels. The panels have like tic-tac-toe boards on them and fire engine steering wheels and that, just different things. You've got to upgrade it and get them back up to, the new up toys.
So that is the presentation regarding the playground renotification for this year and next year. Now we'd like to talk to you a little bit about the NFL Play 60. I don't know, we've see that we had a great donation. So their mission is to make the next generation of the youth the most active and healthy. They launched Play 60 in October 2007. And so far they've dedicated over $200 million, the NFL has. Also, the Dairy Council is part of Play 60, and the Dairy Council was who nominated Lake Grove to receive this. So they're the following equipment, and Rick will tell you about it.
Yep. So we're going to get some volunteers from the United Way, some NFL, hopefully some former players, and then maybe Blitz will come out there and help us out a little bit. So they've donated two different items. This is the rock wall here. That's going to go up by the main structure, and then another piece, the log hopper, which is going to go out to the back. They had the old Iron Mountain Forge ones, the big metal things that are just we can't repair them any longer. So this is going to replace one of them. This is kind of neat. So there'll be probably about 20 volunteers from the NFL, hopefully, and I'll have a team out there, and we'll support everything, and we'll oversee it because pretty much all my guys are already trained for installing toys and inspecting them. So we'll be a big key part in this and get it taken care of on the 3rd.
Yes.
First day of school.
So the last thing I'd like to say is I'd like to thank Rick for his dedication and work towards student safety. Rick's passion for his work has led him to develop an additional safety technique as the last step of safety and health inspection, and I'll show you what that is. Oops, excuse me. Oh, I messed with, but that's it.
That toy
Then
is
I'll go
certified.
backwards.
I certified that toy. It's ready to go.
So that is our health inspector in the back that is certifying our paperwork and why Rick tests out the equipment. And just to go back, because I missed a slide, that Wednesday, September 3rd, 9:30 to 12:30 at Lake Grove, and they are planning on doing a little speaking dedication at 9:30. So everybody's invited. So thank you. If there's any questions?
Yeah, carpool. Are there questions?
I have a question for Rick. Rick, first of all, I just want to thank you for all your hard work with our maintenance department. I appreciate your dedication to what you're doing down there and the excellence that you do it. Two, I wanted to find out, do you personally test all these playgrounds out yourself?
Yes, Danny, I do.
Fantastic.
Thank you, sir.
I also want to thank you, and Rick, it's so much fun to see somebody who enjoys their job that much, and it's obvious, not
the
only
best
from the
job in the
pictures, but from your presentation, that you find this to be a great joy, and we appreciate that.
Thank you, ma'am.
And thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Anything further?
I'm just gonna leave.
Okay, we're moving on now to the excitement of Federal Way High School design. Rod Leland.
Oops. Sorry.
I think you ought to leave that picture up. We gotta post that someplace.
Oh, I think Rod might have some exciting pictures too.
Right.
I just have a few, and I just need the document camera for the expert. Let's see. I have used this before. Here comes our technology experts. I'll begin, and pictures to come when help gets here. So, I'm here tonight to quickly review action taken.
I just gotta figure it out now.
I'm feeling better already.
Yeah, I know. Video. Yeah. I do.
This is a joke. Somebody technicians does it.
There you go.
There you go, thank you.
Oh, wait, we're not here yet.
We're still not there.
I'm going to talk about the action that the board took at the work study a couple of weeks ago, August 12th to be exact. And the bottom line is that the board voted to approve the Federal High School project that was reviewed at that as a piece of that work study, to approve going to bid for the project. So this is a view from the south looking west. Essentially 308 would be on my left and Pack Highway would be on my right. So it's kind of where we're standing at a corner. And I think even more important, given that this is a place for students, this is the inner courtyard, kind of a safe haven where students will be able to gather safely from anything going on outside the school, but yet enjoy the freedom of being outside in a place specifically designed to support them. Some of the things that we covered at the work study, which I think are worth reviewing here, are we give you a review of the design, the concepts that are included in the school. We got a really nice comment that said we had shown that a phrase we've been using for years actually is more obvious in this building than perhaps in the past, and that is that this building will easily follow the changes in instruction and learning over time, again, because the design of the building allows that to happen and is more economical to accomplish. I think the other thing that, and I have a slide for this, I'll start by orienting us to the existing Federal Way High School. So, Pack Highway, 308, 304th, our existing swimming pool that hasn't been active for years, but that's an orientation. This is the existing Federal Way High School today. As you know, earlier in the summer, you accepted a bid to do Project 1 that began within a couple of weeks of the passage of that action. And that project is to create a place for now where the water from the construction site, which will be mucky some of the year, and needs to be treated before it's released. And behind the stadium, there's this green patch, and the creation of that pond is in Project 1, which is underway now. A significant part of Project 1, since we don't get to use that pond for instruction or enjoyment, or really won't have much aesthetic value, is that the rest of the work going on site this summer is preparation for a village of portables, and by Christmas by this Christmas, teachers will begin to move into those portables, and shortly after the holiday seasons, students will move in, and then we'll be, by then, you will have accepted a bid for the construction of the remainder of the Federal Way High School. All of the utilities to support this village will be in place. And I wanted to demonstrate in this picture and not go through all of the many phases, which are complex, but phase 1 that we will actually see begin the first of the year will be that students, teachers will move to this portable village, that the work we're doing between now and then will move to the first removal of hazardous materials in the existing building, which are shown in this lighter gray here. What remains where student will be housed is in the beige. So all of this work here is phase 1. Will be first, the hazardous materials will be removed and the building will be prepped for demolition. That will take maybe 6 months. So no excitement, no building coming down yet. But then when that work is completed, demolition will allow us to begin construction. And this essentially defines phase 1, which is most of our classrooms in the area that will be the future commons. And again, I showed you in the first slide, I think this image may be the best, which is the beginning of the creation of the new school, which sits closer to Pack Highway, closer to 308, and much of it is 3 stories high. So, with your approval of Project 1 and your approval of moving ahead, going to bid on the design that was demonstrated for you at your meeting on the 12th, we've taken step 1. So if you weren't at the open house, there's lots of information that is on our website. Deb Stenberg and others have put together a really nice package. There is a letter going home to parents and students, prepping them for what this beginning of school will look like, because we will be working on site, getting ready for the portables, and the portables will begin to arrive. Anticipation will be that, how are we going to do this? There is a nice plan, keep students safe. In 1 year, a little more than 1 year, we'll be in our new facility, and the portables will soon after that be able to be removed from the site. And we'll carry on with phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4, and a few years later, we'll be done and we'll have a beautiful facility. So if you have thought of questions since the work study, or you have comments, I'm glad to respond to those.
Thank you, Rod. I did field a couple of questions, and I'm not sure of the answer. One was to get some sort of assurance that throughout the construction program that there'd be adequate parking for the teachers. And the second question had to do with the fact that the lot is sloping, and so one of the buildings was going to have a very high first floor, which might accommodate an auto shop in the future. And so the question was, is the floor adequate to support automotive traffic?
So the answer is, to the last question, you're right. There's about a 40-foot drop across the property. So in order not to have too much step down, which we have in the current building, the current Federal High School, we've chosen to essentially drop that floor down, allow a higher ceiling in the primary area where CTE programs are likely to be housed. And yes, the floor is structured to be able to support heavy machinery, jump jacks for working on cars, any of the equipment that you would see, robotics, any kind of heavy duty equipment of any kind. So that floor is reinforced, and the utilities are there that allow it to convert from, it's going to open and look pretty much like it does today, like a wood shop with lots of flexibility, and can easily transition to other programs that come along using that concept. And I put this slide on there to say there will be adequate parking. It will allow safe access to the building. We'll do our best to keep the vehicles that are parked there reasonably safe, given what we can do. And they will be reasonably adjacent to their workspace. It'll change over time. Within the first project, the pool comes down. It doesn't happen early, but later in the first phase, pool comes down, we'll add additional parking there. But throughout the project, you can count on new map every 3 or 4 months, one, to make sure we identify how do you safely access the building, whether you're public or you're student or visitor or doing business there. And that will certainly be a complex situation. I wouldn't dare bring you a final diagram. We know opening day looks pretty much like this. We've identified parking, some close to the building, some away. As we develop more of the northeast side around the pool, we'll have better access to 304th, a concern we heard in our public meetings. And that will allow us to revise the parking a bit. When the portables go away, that opens up a bigger space. But at the same time, we're starting to work up in the beige area. And so that's going to constrain. And you can imagine, looking at the scale of this building, if you just kind of thought about the materials that are coming to do this work, that need to be on site when the contractor needs them, we provide space. It's called a lay-down space, meaning they lay down big materials so that they're ready when they need them, and that adds a constraint on parking. Big trucks will deliver them. Construction workers will be coming. They need to park. Our neighbors in this area hopefully forgive us and accept the beautiful building as the payment for their cooperation in helping us through this part, which will have many challenges, all of which I'm sure we'll be able to meet.
Thank you very much.
There were no further questions? Okay. We're moving on to ends for parent engagement survey. Sally?
Thank you, President Gregory. This is my first presentation of an ends for board acceptance, and again, ends for is related to parent engagement following our standard protocol. Therese Moore did a presentation at a work study that was followed up by a presentation at a regularly scheduled board meeting, and I should have followed that up then in July with an acceptance from the board of those presentation materials. So as a reminder, the 4 key components that our Director of Family and Community Engagement presented was an update on our family liaison work. And I think you also heard in Jerry Carlson's presentation that we have made a commitment to expanding our family liaisons next year. Therese provided us with an update on the Parent Leadership Institute, which had more than 60 graduates this last year. Okay. We started a concept of dynamic home visits. We had 75 families visited last year by 50 teachers, and did some pre and post results, which reflected a dramatic change in our teachers' perspectives of the families and our students. So we're hopeful that that grassroots joy will continue with dynamic home visits, and perhaps with the information that we heard about teachers driving their students' bus routes and stopping at their students' bus stops. That was exciting to hear earlier. And then, of course, the 4th major component of the work reported under ENDS 4 was related to the parent survey. The parent survey document was developed in partnership with K-12 Insight. K-12 Insight is a national vendor that prepares surveys for school districts. They administer the survey and then they tabulate the results. And you'll be hearing more about various surveys that we have in the pipeline in this coming year. But the survey results for last year, the questions were developed, I believe, in conjunction with the roadmap project. So each of the 7 districts in the roadmap project were asking parents the same set of questions, and we believe that they provide us with a solid baseline as we move forward in this year in developing some measurable goals for us to continue to measure the success of our parent engagement. Following the standard protocol, the board members were surveyed. Survey results indicate that the report was deemed to be in compliance. And with that bit of summary information this evening, unless there's questions or additional comments that can be provided, I think there's a motion in front of you to accept that report.
Someone have a motion to make?
President Gregory, I move that the board approve that ends for parent engagement is in compliance.
Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion?
Obviously, it's been noted that the presentation was, we had it back in June and all that, and it's been a busy summer, and et cetera, et cetera. My comments tonight don't take away anything from what I thought was a great presentation that night. I'm excited about our family liaison work. The Parent Institute, that's a great program. It's nationally recognized, some of the stuff we're doing. The dynamic home visits, the parent survey. I think all those things are great things. My only feedback for ENDS4, I think we're in compliance, but my recommendations to the district for this next year is this, I think, out of all the ends that we look at, is the least, is not, some of the other ones are very robust. This one's very specific. But I think with what the ends entails, there could be a lot more information or things brought together, a way that we can analyze how we're doing with parent engagement. Obviously, with the Family Engagement Office, what they do is fantastic, but our parent involvement throughout the district encompasses so much more than that. And so I don't know if there's a way for the district to maybe capture parent guardian involvement across our district. Everything from the amazing amount of volunteer work that's done. We have programs like Watchdogs. We have our PTAs, our PTSAs, all those kinds of things that our parents, guardians, family members that are engaged in our schools, that we don't have an idea of what that percentage is. Typically in life we see the 80-20 rule. 80%, 20% of people doing 80% of the work and that kind of stuff. I would hope, and I'd imagine with the great families that we have in Federal Way, that it's much higher than that with involvement. And I think it would be an opportunity for us to celebrate, and as well maybe look at how are we allowing parents to see the different pathways and avenues to get involved, and maybe parents are missing out on some opportunities. I know every school, sometimes it's school specific, and obviously with all the different campuses, I know it's a complex thing, but maybe that would be something the district could explore and put together some type of presentation to capture that, because that definitely entails. And for the other thing, I'll just tie on that, and I know Claire wants to say something, is maybe it also would include what we're doing to celebrate, and also look at what the communications department is doing with engaging, informing parents. I know we'll have lots of publications and those types of things, and just look at what is our strategy for communicating with parents and guardians, and having that as part of the presentation. Not saying that we're deficient in all those areas right now and we need to fix it, but more just a way to monitor that, to look at, celebrate places that we're doing well, and also it might expose some areas that maybe are redundant, or maybe that was effective 10 years ago, but maybe we need to explore some other avenues to engage our parents and our family members. So those are just a couple of thoughts. Like I said, I think we're in compliance with this. I think we're doing a great job, but I think if we were to bring some of that new information to that report, it might help us as a district achieve this ends even better. So.
And I think that when you hear from the members of the team, besides myself and Director Gregory and even Director Moore, who went to the Institute, you'll see very clearly, again, it needs to be a district-wide focus. We all need to buy in and own what it is that we need to do, and that there's some wonderful new research base that's out there that talks about it as an instructional strategy, and we can't talk about it as an add-on or in addition to. It is just part of what we need to be doing as we think about families and we think about our whole child approach, which is our approach here in this district. So I very much look forward to expanding, and I think we've got the framework of the liaisons, which really gives us a school-based framework, and now we know families coming to schools have a place and a person, and then we can work on, as you're saying, some of those other kinds of systems and other groups, and also other communities that we've not engaged, and really in our Federal Way community talk about what that partnership might look like.
Well, and I touched on that. I don't know if it's just a work on it, because I think there's already things that exist. It's not like we need to do something about it, because I agree with that, what you're saying. It's, but I just think right now we're not really, that's not been a part of the conversation for ENDS 4. And so that's just something I'd like to just add with it. And it sounds like that's stuff that you talked about at your
Well, that's saying, and that's, yeah, that's what I'm saying, that really Harvard gave a larger group than just Treese, really some ammunition, if you will, and some information and some strategies about how we may do that at a district system level and provide the support that we know we need to if we're going to ask especially staff to make some changes in their practice. So I'm looking forward to it too.
Sounds good.
Yeah, part of what I'm hearing out of this, and it really ties back to the policy of itself. So I'm excited about the Policy Governance Committee coming together and really evaluating what was established in 2010 and how do we gain some more meat in it. I think we're doing phenomenal work in it, but the reason I say this is a compliance, because based on what the policy says, we're doing all of that, and I know we're doing great work, but we have to really evaluate that and look at it. So I'm excited about the work that the board's going to do around evaluating our policies and understanding what's there and partnering with the district to make sure we can show all the successes we're having.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
I would just reinforce what Claire said, and we were in a meeting today with the rest of the team and that Treese called, and I think we've got to think about this a little differently. There are many components to it, but the point that Claire made that I think is so powerful is that this is, in fact, an instructional strategy to improve education for kids. And that's a little different look. It's not just about parents knowing how to navigate a school, which is very important in this district, but how can we help support parents as partners in the educational training? And that was really profound to me, that we also need to add. I don't disagree with you on the other aspects as well, but that is where I think the new power is in this arena.
Absolutely.
May I?
Sure.
Well, I just want to, again, thank Therese Moore for her leadership in launching a program and bringing us to a place where we're excited to be engaged in a conversation about going to the next level. So again, I just want to say thank you very much, Therese, for launching the key communicators, for kind of being the solo voice out there for a period of time. And I'm pleased to hear us looking for expanded ways to recognize the work that's occurring and to look for new connections. So thank you all for that input.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Whoops, I put my agenda away. Okay. I see why I put it away. We are done. Is there anything further to come before the board? Seeing none, we are adjourned. In 1984. What year is that? Oh, that was great.